I hope that you are well and are having an amazing day. All right, so now we are going to be doing our grade 7 English lesson. We'll be doing our grade 7 English lesson on adjectives and adverbs, right? And before we go on to our grade 7 English lesson on adjectives and adverbs, we are going to log into a+students.ca page. So you'll a+students.ca. Once you've gone to a+students.ca, you're going to log in with your username as well as your password. All right, so once you've logged in with your username as well as your password, you are going to select the subject of language arts. And then we scroll to grade 7. All right, so by the I grade 7, you're going to scroll down up until you get to the chapter of adjectives and adverbs. So adjectives and adverbs. So let's find adjectives and adverbs. There you go. So once we are in the chapter adjectives and adverbs, the lessons that we are going to be focusing on is choose between adjectives and adverbs, and is the word an adjective or an. All right. So that is going to be our two focus lessons under the chapter of adjectives and adverbs. Let's go into the first one. And the first one says we need to choose between adjectives and adverbs. All right. Okay. An adjective. Let's start with an adjective. An adjective, it is a word that describes or modifies a noun or a pronoun, right? So an adjective, it is a word that either describes or it modifies a noun or a pronoun, right? Or we can basically just say an adjective, it tells us about the noun. Adjectives, it often tells us what kind, or it can tell us how many. So adjectives, it's words that describes or it modifies a noun or a pronoun. And adjectives will either tell us what kind or they will tell us how many. And if we look at an example, right, then we can say the apples were delicious. So the apples were, so the word delicious is the adjective, right? And delicious is the adjective that tells us what kind of apples they were, which means they were delicious apples, right? So once again, an adjective, it is a word that describes or it modifies a noun or a pronoun, right? It's the same as somebody would say that it tells us about the noun, but it describes, it modifies, right? And adjectives, it will often tell us either what kind or it will tell us how many. So if you were to identify the adjective within a sentence, and then you will basically ask yourself things like what kind, right? Or is it telling me what kind? Or is it telling me how many, right? Because that is an adjective. Then we have an adverb. An adverb. And an adverb is it's a word that describes or it modifies again a verb, right? Describes, modifies an adjective or it describes or modifies another adverb or adjective and an adverb, right? So adverbs, they again often tell us how, they tell us where, to what extent, or to what degree. So an adverb, sorry, is a word that describes or modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb, right? And adverbs that will often tell us how, when, where, to what extent, or to what degree. So basically, if you identify an adverb within a sentence, then it's either you asking yourself questions like, is it telling me how, when, where, to what extent, or to what degree? So those are basically questions that you need to ask yourself in order to identify what the adverb is, right? And that adverb that basically describes or modifies either a verb, adjective, or an adverb. If we look at an example of an adverb, right, then we can say, like for example, over here, Grace ran really quickly. So Grace ran really quickly, right? So the adverb really, it tells us how quickly Grace ran. So the adverb really, it tells us how quickly Grace ran. So how, right? Because remember we said that if you were to either describe, modify, or identify basically an adverb, then you need to also keep in mind that an adjective, it asks or tells you how, when, where, to what extent, or what degree. So you can basically ask yourself those type of questions. Like, does it tell me how? Does it tell me when? Does it tell me where? Does it tell me to what degree or to what extent? And then that is how you will be able to identify what your adverb is within a sentence. So in the case of, if we look at the sentence of Grace ran really quickly, right? So really is the adverb, right, that tells us how quickly Grace ran. How quickly Grace ran. So now most adverbs, right, that tells us how, they end in ly. So most adverbs that tells us how, they end in ly. So of course, not all adverbs, but most of the adverbs that ends in, or basically that tells us how, they end in ly, right? Like the adverb quickly, right? So quickly ends in ly, and it also, it's like you asking yourself like how, right? He quickly ran to the shop. You can't always just use ly to tell whether a word is an adjective or an adverb, right? So sometimes we, yes, as much as we say that most adverbs, they tell us how, or that tells us how, end in ly, right? But not all, or it's not just adverbs that ends in ly that gives us an indication that he's an adverb, right? And also not all adverbs, right, that tells us how ends in ly. That is why we're saying most. All right, if we now look at the next sentence, right, or next example, she arrives soon. She arrives soon. Soon. So soon is our adverb, right? And as you can see, soon, it does not end in ly. In ly. But then again, if you were to ask yourself, like soon, right? So it's like asking yourself, when will she be arriving? So she will be arriving soon. It's not necessarily having to say Monday or Tuesday or giving a specific time, right? But soon is an indication that she will be coming soon. So when? Soon. And as we can see, soon, it is an adverb, but it does not end in ly. And that is why we say most adverbs that tell us how they usually end in ly, to tell us how they end in ly. But soon over here, it basically tells us how, tells us when, right? So it tells us when. When will she arrive? So soon. Fred has a dog. Friendly is an adjective, right? So as much as we said that adverbs, it tells us how they end in ly, but also certain adjectives, right, will also tell us about them again and not just about the verb. And they also end in y. Like for example, here, Fred has a friendly dog, right? So friendly describes the dog, right? So what kind of dog does Fred have? He has a friendly dog. Ends in ly. And that is not an adverb, but it is an adjective. So some adjectives also end in ly, whereas most adverbs that tells us how they end in ly. All right. All right, so now we're going to choose the best, we're going to choose the word that best describes or modifies a noun in bold, right? We need to identify a noun, or basically the word that modifies the noun, which means that we're going to have to choose an adjective, because an adjective, it modifies or describes the noun. Massive, thick walls with small openings for windows are what of the Romanesque architecture, right? So we need to choose a specific word that best let's modifies the noun or describes the noun. So massive, thick walls with small openings for windows are what of the Romanesque architecture. We need to choose the word that best describes or modifies a noun in bold. All right, so if we look at our options, right? So a word, they gave us two words, right? They gave us typically and they gave us typical, right? So typically and typical, right? So they said that the word walls is a noun. So it must be described or modified by an adjective, right? Because remember, we said that an adjective, it describes or modifies a noun. Whereas an adverb, it describes and modifies an adverb, adjective, or a verb. It modifies a verb, adjective, or another adverb, right? And in this case, or in the sentence here, where it says that, or the instance where we need to show the word that modifies the noun, which is walls, right? There's two words that is given. There's typically that is given, or typical. So if we now look at the two words typically, the word typically is an adverb, and then typical is an adjective, right? So if we need to choose a word that describes or modifies a noun, then it means that we need to choose the adjective, right? So the adjective within this sentence is, or basically the answer is typical, not typically, it is just typical, right? So the adjective typical is the best word to complete the sentence. So massive, thick walls with small openings for windows are typical of the Romanesque architecture. So typically is an adverb. And we said an adverb, it describes and modifies either the verb, an adjective, or another adverb. So typical is our answer. We need to choose the word that best describes or modifies the noun within this sentence, or modifies the noun. After becoming famous for the best selling novel, the writer wondered whether her life would ever be. Again, we need to choose. Let's look at the option. So we will say normal over here. Let me get my pen. Let's write normal. Let's rather not look right on the. Let's just say normal. All right. So the best possible options that is given to us is and normally. So normal is an adjective and normally is an adverb, right? And we need to choose a word that describes or modifies the noun. And a word that describes and modifies a noun is an adjective, which means that the word that we are looking for is normal. So the adjective is normal, and that is the best word to describe or to complete the sentence. So let's reread the sentence. After becoming famous for the best selling novel, the writer wondered whether her life would ever be normal again. We need to choose the word that best describes or modifies the verb in bold. And if we choose a word that best describes or modifies a verb, then it means that we are looking at adverbs. So, Mitchell and Lacey sell their handmade crafts bazaars around the country. To sell, they sell their handmade crafts at bazaars around the county, not country. So the two words that is given to us is occasional and occasionally. So occasional and occasionally. We need to choose one of these words, right? And then we need to write it in the space provided for the sentence, right? So the word sell is a verb, right? So the word sell is a verb. So it must then be described or modified by an adverb, right? So as much as they gave us two words, which is occasional, which is adjective, and sometimes, which is an adverb, we can only choose one. And once again, it says the word sell is a verb, so it must be described or modified by an adverb, right? All right, so if we then choose the correct word to fall within that sentence, and we can say is sometimes Michelle and Lacey sell their handmade crafts at bazaars around the county. Sometimes, right? So when or how often? Sometimes. Sometimes we sell it, sometimes we don't. So sometimes is the adverb, right? And remember, we said that we need, or they're looking for a word that modifies the verb, which is an adverb. We now need to choose the word that best describes or modifies a noun in bold. The word that best describes, modifies the noun in bold. Massive thick walls with small openings for windows are. And we said that is typical. We said that is typical, which is an adjective. All right, let's go to the next one. Choose the word that best describes or modifies the noun in bold. So, after becoming famous for her best selling novel, the writer wondered whether her life would ever be again. So, we need to choose between would her life be normal or normally, because normal is an adjective, normally is an adverb. So, after becoming famous, the best the best selling novel for her best novel, the writer wondered whether her life would ever be again. Is it normal again or normally? We need to choose between normal and normal. So basically, the life, right, or life is a noun. So life is a noun. So if life is a noun, then it means that we need to um, choose an adjective, because an adjective, it describes or modifies a noun, right? So you cannot give an answer that is for basically a verb, right? Because they're specifically asking us to identify, not identify, to say, but to choose the best word that modifies the noun in bold. So the noun. And we say that the word life, it is a noun, so it must be described or modified by an adjective. And here we have two words given. So we have normal, which is an adjective, and then we have normally, which is an adverb. So if we were to choose the best possible answer to basically match that sentence, then we will say normal. So basically, after becoming famous for her best selling novel, the writer wondered whether her life would ever be normal again. So, normal is the adjective, and it is the adjective that describes or it modifies the noun. So, not normally, because normally is an adverb. All right, and we did that one already. Okay, now let's do the test. We need to choose the word that best describes the verb in bold. The young lawyer accidentally or accidental misplaced a highly important legal document, but he found it just in time for the trial. So the young lawyer, was it accidentally or accidental, misplaced a highly important legal document, but he found it just in time for his trial. So we need to choose between accidentally and accidental. All right, so if we choose the correct one, specifically based on the young lawyer that misplaced a highly important legal document but just found it in time for the trial, then let's say accidentally. All right, so accident, if you have accidentally, then it is correct. The courageously soldiers or the courageous soldier faced difficult challenges during his service in the military. So the soldier faced difficult challenges during his service in the military. We need to choose the word that best describes or modifies the noun in bold. So is it, are we going to add courageously or courageous? So courageously soldier faced difficult challenges, or the courageous soldier faced difficult challenges during his service in the. So we need to choose the word that best describes or modifies the noun. All right, let's choose courageous. And courageous is a word that best a noun. So it either describes or it modifies the noun, right? So keeping in mind it either describes or it modifies the noun. After a 10-mile hike, Paul had his painful cramps in his leg muscles or painfully cramps in his legs muscles. All right, so we will say painful cramps in his leg muscles. So painful is a word that describes or modify the noun. All right, let's go back. So that was us choosing between adjectives and adverbs, right? So now we're going on this one that says, is the word an adjective or is the word an adverb? So we're going to have to now choose if the word is either an adjective or if the word is an verb, right? And just to recap on what an adjective as well as an adverb is, an adjective is a word that describes or modifies a noun or a pronoun. And adjectives often tell us what kind or how many, right? So the way it is either describing or modifying the noun, it basically asks questions either of what kind or how many. And then we have an adverb, which is a word that describes or modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. And adverbs, right, they often tell us how, they tell us when, where, to what extent, or to what degree. And that is adverbs. So basically, an adverb, remember, it describes or modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. And it often tells us how, when, where, to what extent, or to what degree. And usually, adjectives, right? that tells us how. Not adjectives, sorry, the adverbs. So usually the adverbs that tells us how, they usually end in ly. For example, like quickly. It quickly ends in ly. So as much as quickly end in ly, or let's say most of the adverbs that tells us how end in ly, but not all the words end in ly. So not all the words end in ly. Some words that also end in ly, they are basically called adjectives, right? So an adjective, if we look at the example that we have of an adjective over here, Fred has a friendly dog, which means that friendly, that ends in ly, it is in this case an adjective and it ends in ly, not an adverb, right? And they end in ly. All right. So now we need to say if the word is an adjective or an adverb. At the conference, I heard an absolutely incredible speaker give a talk about the history of aviation. So we need to look at the word absolutely and we need to say if it's either an adjective or if it is an adverb. All right, so if we look at the word absolutely, right? So then we can say absolutely, it describes or modifies the adjective, which is incredible, right? So if it is basically modifying or describing the adjective, and then it is basically an adverb. So it's an adverb. And an adverb, it basically describes or modifies either an adjective or an adverb or a verb, right? And these are adverbs. All right, if we look at the next one, in everything she does, Regan demonstrates a genuine desire to help others. Genuine is the word, right? So, genuine, we need to say that word is either an adjective or an adverb, right? So, genuine. So, the word genuine, it describes or it modifies a noun, right? So, genuine. And we call that an adjective. And an adjective, it describes or modifies a noun, which is desire. And the word genuine describes or modifies that noun, which is desire. So that is an adjective, right? The temperature was already exceedingly cold, yet it continued to drop throughout the night. Exceedingly cold. We need to say whether it is an adjective or an adverb, right? By specifically looking at the word exceedingly. So the temperature was already exceedingly cold, yet it continued to drop throughout the night. Exceedingly, we need to say whether it is an adjective or an adverb. So in this case, exceedingly, right, it describes or modifies the adjective. Adjective is cold. right? Which means that this word exceedingly, it is adverb. And remember, we said an adverb, it describes or modifies either a verb, or describes and modifies an adjective, or it describes and modifies another adverb, right? So exceedingly. And in this case, exceedingly, it modifies the adjective cold. So we can then say that that is an adverb. All right, so now we are going on to our test, right? A test where we're going to say if the word is either an adjective or an adverb. Is the word in italics, or is the italic word an adjective or an adverb? The Constitution of the the Constitution of the United States divides federal government into three branches so that no single branch can become too powerful. So we need to say if the word in italics, which is federal, is either an adjective or if it's an adverb. So look, the word that is underlined is government, right? Which means that it describes that word. So federal, the federal government. All right, so if we look at it divides the federal government into three branches, then we can then say it is, let's choose an adjective, right? Because it describes the noun, which is the government. Although Helen Keller faced many challenges, she was extremely courageous and became the first deaf blind person to graduate from college. We need to say if courageous is an adjective or an adverb, and courageous, it describes the pronoun, right, which is basically in place of Helen Keller. Courageous. So if it describes the pronoun, then we can say it is an adjective, right? Because courageous either describes a pronoun or a. These salon shampoos are extremely expensive. The generic brand is less than half the price. So extremely expensive. We need to say if the word extremely is either an adjective or an adverb. All right, so we were to identify that as being an adjective or an adverb, then we can maybe say, let's choose the adverb because it extremely, right? Although Mr. Jen is 80 years old, he is still remarkably active and exercises daily. So active, describing or modifying him, which is Mr. Jensen, right? Is that an adjective or an adverb? So active. In this case, active and the word underlined is the pronoun, right? So active and him, it means that we can say it is an adjective because it describes or modifies him, which is basically Mr. Jensen, right? All right, so that is basically now where we had to choose the word. or say is the word either adjective or adverb, right? And remember when we choose words that either that's either an adjective or an adverb, right? Then we need to sometimes bear in mind, actually keep in mind, is it a noun or is it an adjective, a verb, or another adverb, right? Because an adjective, it modifies or describes a noun or pronoun, and an adverb, it describes or modifies either a verb, an adjective, or another adverb, right? So we need to then be able to identify basically if it's a verb, an adjective, or an adverb, or if it's a noun. And then we will be able to get the specific word that basically describes or modifies that verb, adjective, adverb, or the noun, right? All right, so now we are going to do some activities, right, on adjectives and adverbs. All right, so in this case, right, if we look at the very simple or simplest adjectives, right, it says an adjective is a word that describes a noun. So if we look at all of these words that we see, right, we need to try and circle or identify an adjective, um, let's say basically with all of these pictures or the words that we see, right? All right. So if we look at the word red, right, then we can identify red as being an adjective. Why? Because red, it can either tell us what kind, right? It's a red car, right? Small can also describe, right? Small or big. Um, Soft, or we can say it's hard, right? A pleasant day, long pants, long short something, short person, the fast car, the poor person, right? So these are adjectives that we basically identified, right? And an adjective, we say that modifies or it describes a noun. So an adjective, it modifies or describes a noun. All right, if we look at the next one, it says you need to write the adjective which describes the picture in the on the lines below. We have big, clean, new, old, long, small, cute, dirty, short, and fat, right? All right, so now if we look at the first one, the first picture has got marks on, right? So we can say it is a dirty t-shirt because it looks very dirty. And then we look at the next one, right? And then it looks spotless clean. So we have clean and we have dirty. If we not describe the hair, right, on both of these ladies, the one we can say is short and the other one we can say is long hair. So short hair and long hair. All right. If we go right down to the rabbit and the cat, right, we can say there's a a fat cat, the fat cat, and we have a cute rabbit. We have a car, and we have a small car, right, small or big, and then we have a new house, and then we have the old house. So these are basically words that describes the noun, right? And we said words that either describes or modifies a noun, we call them adjectives, and words that describes or modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb, those are adverbs. So, grade 7, that is now the end of our lesson on adjectives and adverbs. And remember, we see that an adjective, it describes or modifies a noun, and they often tell us how many or what kind. And then an adverb, it describes or modifies either the verb, an adjective, or another adverb. And they often tell us how, when, where, to what extent, or to what degree. So that is the end of our lesson on adjectives and adverbs. You should have an amazing evening further. Goodbye.